Romania International. You are listening to our one-hour broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan. We can also be heard on the internet at www.ro Channel 1. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and other social media platforms. Also available on TuneIn and via satellite Eurosat 16A on 11,512 megahertz, vertical polarization, azimuth 16 degrees east. Symbol rate 29,950 megasymbols per second, standard DVB-S2, modulation 8 PSK, audio PID 510. We wish you good reception conditions. Hello, this is Daniel Biltz with the news, the headlines. Romania's Prime Minister Florin Câțu says a V-shaped recovery of the Romanian economy is certain after data made public by the National Statistics Institute for the last quarter of 2020 points to a 5.3% growth rate. Representatives of the hospitality industry in Romania staged new protests against the pandemic containment measures introduced by the authorities in Bucharest on Tuesday. And the world's number 2 tennis player, Simona Halep, lost to Serena Williams in the round of 16 of the Australian Open. Romania's Prime Minister Florin Câțu says a V-shaped recovery of the Romanian economy is certain after data made public by the National Statistics Institute for the last quarter of 2020 points to a 5.3% growth rate. He mentioned that in 2020 Romania's economy, just like the global economy, was hit by the biggest crisis of the last century. Florin Câțu also added that last year Romania performed 5% better than originally estimated and 2.5% in average better than all forecasts made by international institutions, the European Commission, financial rating agencies and other financial institutions. In another development, a Bloomberg survey published on Tuesday shows that the evolution of the Romanian economy has outperformed other EU economies in the fourth quarter of 2020 after the government's decision not to impose the severe restrictions which closed down most of the continent. Representatives of the hospitality industry organized in Bucharest on Tuesday new protests against the pandemic containment measures introduced by the authorities. Employers in the sector demand the payment of the promised compensations for last year when their operations declined by 70%. In Monday's meeting with hospitality representatives, the Economy Minister Claudiu Năsui promised that the government earmarked over 510 million euros for financial support in the draft budget. On Monday, members of Sanitas Union Federation picketed the Finance Ministry headquarters to warn that a smaller budget for public health care in a year with the coronavirus pandemic is not only an injustice to the workers in the system, but also deeply immoral to Romania's citizens. Romanian tennis player Simona Halep, number 2 in the world, on Tuesday lost in Melbourne to the American Serena Williams 6-3, 6-3 in the 8th finals of the Australian Open. Halep and Williams have so far had 11 matches in professional competitions, with Williams winning 9 of them. The latest match was the Wimbledon final of 2019 when the Romanian won 6-2, 6-2. In 2019, they also played against each other in the 8th finals in Melbourne when Williams won 6-1, 4-6, 6-4. 2,676 new SARS-CoV-2 cases were reported in Romania in the last 24 hours, out of nearly 33,000 tests conducted nationwide, according to the Strategic Communication Group. Romania has so far had around 766,000 confirmed coronavirus infections. Nearly 90% of the patients have recovered. Authorities have also announced another 81 COVID-19 related deaths, taking the death toll to over 19,500. Another 943 patients are in intensive care. In another development, the head of the National Committee for Coordinating the Vaccination Campaign, Dr. Valeriu Gheorghiță, on Tuesday announced that less than 2 months into the present vaccination campaign, its beneficial effects are already visible. According to official figures, roughly 90% of the eligible medical personnel have been vaccinated with the first dose and the booster, while 98% got the first dose. In the next period, authorities are going to mainly focus on the vaccination of the teaching staff in Romania's education system, Valeriu Gheorghiță went on to say. The Chamber of Deputies is to vote on Wednesday on the first simple motion of this legislative team tabled by the Social Democrats in opposition against the Health Minister Vlad Voiculescu. The deputies discussed the motion on Monday. The Social Democrats claimed that Minister Voiculescu was not sufficiently involved in the immunization and testing programs, and that he issued messages conflicting with the coordinators of the national vaccination campaign, discouraging the healthcare workers involved in the process. And that was the news from Radio Romania International in Bucharest.
The opposition in Romania is unsatisfied with the state of the healthcare system. I'm Elena Enache, bringing you more on this topic in a report by Corina Cristea. Romania's parliament on Monday was the site of a dispute between the political power and the opposition, who blamed each other for the sorry state of the country's healthcare system. At the initiative of the Social Democratic Party, the main party in the opposition, Health Minister Vlad Voiculescu was summoned in Parliament to answer some questions regarding the recent tragedy at the Matei Balch Hospital in Bucharest, where a fire killed several intubated patients. Accused of not having taken any measures for the patient's safety, Minister Voiculescu is now faced with the first simple motion tabled by the Social Democrats against a member of the current cabinet. PSD says the minister was not active enough as regards the testing and immunization of the population, and that his message to the coordinators of the vaccination campaign were contradictory and even discouraging for the physicians involved in this process. He did not come up with concrete solutions, says the Social Democrat MP Alexandru Rafila.
Să nu ne spună lucruri de genul Ministerul evaluează, monitorizează și lucruri de genul ăsta, care n-au niciun
He should not tell us things like the ministry assesses, monitors and such, which have no impact without concrete safety measures in hospitals, measures to improve testing and epidemiological monitoring in the context of this public health emergency. The lack of responsibility is fatal. That was the Social Democrat MP Alexandru Rafila. In his turn, Minister Vlad Voiculescu said that in the 2 months since he took office, around 10 million euros have been allocated to investment in COVID hospitals. Schools have been reopened, the access to testing has increased, and physicians have been paid to schedule patients for vaccination, Voiculescu explained. He also said that the Social Democratic Party is guilty for the current state of the Romanian healthcare system.
Vorbesc despre asumare, oamenii partidului care de la Revoluție încoace au avut 12
The ones who speak about responsibility are precisely those who had 12 health ministers since the 1989 revolution. The ones who speak about responsibility are the party colleagues of the last 3 health ministers before me. All 3 of them investigated by the National Anti-Corruption Directorate. The ones who speak about responsibility headed the health ministry for 18 of the last 30 years, during which time they created strong organized crime networks with their party branches, with their county councils, networks that go as far as parliament. That was Health Minister Vlad Voiculescu. Minister Voiculescu was supported by the MPs with the USR Plus alliance and by its partners in the ruling coalition, the National Liberal Party, PNL, and the Democratic Union of Ethnic Hungarians in Romania, who said they would not vote the motion. In their turn, the representatives of the Alliance for the Union of Romanians said they plan to support the Social Democrats' initiative. The vote will be held on Wednesday in the Chamber of Deputies plenary session.
A number of protests have been staged in Bucharest against the government's current economic and social policies. I am Vlad Palcu with this report by Roxana Vasile. Ever since the first days of the year, a number of professional and social categories in Romania took to the streets to voice their discontent with the way the centre-right coalition government has been managing some of the hot topics on the public agenda. Protesters are asking for decent wages, fair pensions, quality public services, fair taxes, and the rightful application of the legislation. Amidst heated political debates regarding the 2021 state budget law, trade unions with the Sanitas Federation on Monday staged a rally in front of the Finance Ministry building. They are disgruntled with the low budget allocated to healthcare this year, which is unfair not just because due to the ongoing COVID pandemic, but also an immoral act against Romanian citizens. Trade unions say healthcare should get 9% of the GDP, as all Romanians need a public health system that can save them from SARS-CoV-2, treat their chronic illnesses, and ensure emergency health services. One of the protesters explained what prompted him to come to Bucharest all the way from Cluj.
Nedreptățile pe care guvernul le prevede în legătură cu bugetul și cu alte...
We are unhappy with inequities stipulated in the government's budget by slashing bonuses or freezing salaries for various categories of workers. At the start of its mandate, the government promised they wouldn't touch the salaries of health workers or their bonuses. Equally discontented are workers in the hospitality sector. Employers in this field have called on the government to pay the compensations they were promised last year, considering this sector reported a 70% drop in its activity. They also asked the government not to scrap holiday vouchers for public sector employees. Dragoș Anastasiu, the coordinator of the Coalition for Romania's Development.
Industria este în suferință în momentul de față și are nevoie de sprijinul principalului coactiv.
The industry is suffering right now, and we need the support of the number one stakeholder in every company, namely the Romanian state. We find it unacceptable to make firm promises, including by introducing legislation without keeping them. Dragoș Anastasiu. Finally, trade unionists with the Cartel Alpha National Confederation have joined the chorus of protests against the government's current economic and social policies. The unionists have been staging protests since January the 14th. Cartel Alpha representatives say the burden of austerity will weigh heavy on workers and pensioners, with considerable effects on vulnerable population categories with lower incomes. And that has wrapped up our newscast.
Program is Song of the Day. Listen to Feli with a song about longing.
Încă-mi intră sub piele o ia la goană și inima. E gândul doar la iubire, asta că și mâine vine. și jale, visez la buzele care să-mi stingă setea de tot ce vreau. Știu și cerul și pământul, îmi zboară mie gândul, doar după păgână mai stau.
To Radio Romania International.
Focus on Romania. Inside Romania.
Welcome to Inside Romania. I'm Eugen Nasta. He studied documentary photography in London. Upon his return to Romania, he was set to rediscover the world he left behind using the camera, whether he was taking pictures or filming. It was a tricky point for the working site in the time of the pandemic, a project that took off thanks to the fortnightly lockdown Ionut Stilderașcu had been under in his flat in an apartment house in Romania. Ionut immortalized construction works for the neighboring block of flats. Then the pandemic in the countryside followed. It was another project consisting of snapshots of village life which had remained unchanged, save for the ear-loop mask people living there had to wear. But what compelled our attention as regards Ionut Stilderașcu was a project for which Ionut scooped the Golden Award in the People Family category as part of the 2020 Budapest International Photo Awards, titled There's Nobody Home. Ionut Stilderașcu introduced himself as a documentary photographer. He told us how the project took off. The short reel documentary titled There's Nobody Home was released in April 2019. So it was then that my idea took shape. I called in at my grandmother's house. It had been uninhabited in the last 10 years, and it was more like a curiosity for me to take a look inside. Once I entered the house, I noticed all my grandmother's stuff was there. Things were almost untouched. It was like a capsule of time. Then I returned there with my father, since I asked him to tell the story of their childhood, what parents had been like when they were still alive, since I, for one, did not meet the grandpa on my father's side. He died at the age of 44. Then I got back again, this time with my aunties. I asked them to tell me more, and that's how I discovered a part of my grandmother's past, and I said to myself, the best thing to do is to tell the whole story in a documentary short reel, so that I may blend the image with the sounds of the house, as I made recordings when I went there with my parents or my aunties to my grandmother's house. I made the documentary short reel late last year. The film was received better than he expected, or at least that is what Ionut Stilderașcu told us.
Prima dată l-am lansat în România în cadrul unui takeover, m-am preluat pagina de Instagram a revistei de
The first time I launched it in Romania was as part of a takeover. It was posted on the Instagram page of the magazine titled It is only a magazine, and it was there that I laid out the story for the first time ever, but it had been released in Great Britain before. It was posted on a platform dedicated to documentary photography. It was launched there. With this project, I also participated in a competition before the year ended. A photo album featuring students was posted there, one of the first albums Canon has made, and it was there that the project took off. Then I participated in a contest in Budapest where I won the Gold Vibe, the Golden Award, with this project. Subsequently, it was also posted on other channels here in Romania. Here is Ionut Stolderascu once again, this time taking us through the whole story of the film.
E o senzația că pășești într-un alt timp. Odată ce intri în casă, simți cumva imaginea asta care te afectează.
The sensation I get is that you're stepping in another time. As soon as you step into the house, you feel those images that affect you a lot emotionally. You see crumbling walls of spiderwebs, very big. It is that kind of image you wouldn't want to see, especially if you have a personal connection with the family who lived there. Yet it is an area where the history of a family has been very well preserved, since the place we live in, after all, defines us, and the whole time Granny lived there, she used to live there on a permanent basis for the last 20 years. She collected all the things she needed. She arranged them. She somehow got ready for her death as well. She had prepared everything for that already. And you could see they were still there. I found pills. I found letters Granny had kept there. And all that stuff speaks volumes about the person who used to live there. The film takes us to the village of Crăiești, Galați County, the village of the filmmaker's childhood, where we're about to visit a special house.
Casa este atipică pentru zona de acolo. Casele cumva acolo sunt mai mici, cu două camere.
The house is atypical for that area, but the houses are sort of smaller. There are two-room houses, but the Granny's house does have a history of its own. It was purpose-built. It was supposed to house the administration, the prefecture or the town hall, and was afterwards sold to my grandfather. It has tall doors. The materials are very good. They are made of solid wood, and it was built on top of a hill. The view of the village from there is very picturesque. It is old enough. It is 100 years old, or sort of. Here is Ionut Stolderascu once again, this time extending an invitation to all of us.
Îndemn pe oameni să urmărească următorul documentar, îl găsesc la mine pe website teodrașcu.com sau pe YouTube.
I encourage everybody to watch the documentary short reel. You can access it on my website at teodrașcu.com or on YouTube or on the Facebook page, as I think this documentary somehow tells the story of several families, guiding us as to how we should look at a family's past, in a bit to get everybody understand the idea that a family's past is here and there, and it is romanticized by those who are still alive, because we want to know that our parents lived a good life. And perhaps that is exactly why, after they die, we try to reconstruct the past, rendering it more romanticized. And that's what I speak about in my documentary short reel, apart from the whole story about my grandparents that I tell there. For those who are interested, in Zalo, the photographs made by Ionut Stolderascu are brought together in the exhibition titled The Faces of the Pandemic, and that was inside Romania.
This is Radio Romania International. Cultural event.
Hello and welcome to Cultural Event with me, Elena Enarche. 15 theaters in Romania and one in the Republic of Moldova have joined the program Belarusia Worldwide Reading Project, an unprecedented solidarity action with artists in Belarus created by Andrei Kurecic. On the 26th of August 2020, just 20 years before its 100th anniversary, the National Theatre of Minsk ceased to exist. The actors reunited in a basement where they continued work, posting their performances online. In this context, playwright Andrei Kurecic wrote a play about the reality that he and the entire country were facing. Insulted Belarusia is a play in which, alongside the two presidential candidates, 5 more representative characters live their lives tragically impacted by Lukashenko's decision to crush Belarusians' peaceful revolution with violence and torture. It is a snapshot of all that is happening in Belarus at present, something that can happen anywhere at any point. It is a cry for help and a wake-up call aimed to raise awareness among as many people as possible about the concrete situation and at the same time about the danger of any type of dictatorship. On the 12th of September 2020, a first reading of the play was organized in Ukraine, thus kickstarting a project designed by John Friedman, who translated the play into English. Over the last 4 months, the play was translated into 21 languages and read 130 times in 80 theaters of 22 countries, from New York and Boston to Hong Kong, London, Edinburgh, Amsterdam, The Hague, Stockholm, Prague, Budapest, Vilnius, Tel Aviv, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Bucharest, and Chisinau. Every day between February 7 and 22nd, based on the initiative of Raluca Radulescu, who translated the play into Romanian, one of the partner theaters in Romania shows an online or live play reading in solidarity with the theater movement and the citizens of Belarus, who for 6 months have been relentlessly protesting for freedom and the right to free elections. Raluca Radulescu.
Această piesă este legată de nevoia de libertate a oamenilor, a artiștilor.
The play, written by Andrei Kuricic, is about the need for freedom of the people and artists in Belarus. Director Radu Gilaș with the Iași National Theatre, who is a friend of Andrei Kuricic, came to me with the proposal to translate the play into Romanian. I translated it very quickly. They shortly made a reading of the play and then staged it into theaters in Chisinau, the Republic of Moldova, because the country was holding elections and the topic was very important. Theater does have this social role, or should have a social role in the life of a country. I kept monitoring the situation at the National Theatre in Minsk, which was closed down almost 6 months ago, although it has a 100-year-long history. Andrei Kuricic said that not even Hitler, when he invaded Belarus, did not suspend the theater's activity as it happened at present. In fact, the theater has a new manager, but there is not a new group of actors, given that the resigning actors now work in the basement, where they stage shows that are broadcast online. They no longer have their names linked to the theater, and that has been a cultural event.
Next in this program, sports. Welcome everyone, I'm Vlad Balcu. Romanian footballer Claudiu Cheșeru scored 4 goals for his club Ludogorets Razgrad of Bulgaria in the 6-0 win against Etar Veliko Târnova on home turf, counting towards the 17th round of the Bulgarian domestic championship. Claudiu Cheșeru scored on minutes 6, 36, 51 and 61 and had another good scoring opportunity on minute 56. For his remarkable achievement, we have designated Claudiu Cheșeru Athlete of the Week on Radio Romania International. Seen as one of the best strikers in the Bulgarian First League, Claudiu Cheșeru is the second best goal scorer in Bulgaria with 12 goals in 13 games. He is outranked only by Matias Curel of France, playing for Chernomore Varna, who is in top position with 15 goals. Claudiu Cheșeru was born December 2, 1986 in Oradea, Western Romania. He made his debut at FC Bihon. Then he was transferred by FC Nantes in France, where he played for 7 years. He spent a 3-year spell at Angers, also in the French Championship. Then he played for a short time for Bastia. In 2014, Claudiu Cheșeru moved to Romania, playing for Steaua Bucharest. He distinguished himself as one of the best performing players of the team from Bucharest. On August 15, 2014, Claudiu Cheșeru managed to score 6 goals in a match against Andurii Târgu Jiu, which Steaua won 6-0. A month later, on September 18th, in a match counting towards the first round of the Europa League, Claudiu Cheșeru scored 3 goals within 12 minutes for his club Steaua. It was the fastest hat-trick ever recorded in the competition's history. In 2015 he played for a few months for Algarafa in Qatar. Then he moved to Ludogorets Razgrad in Bulgaria, winning all championship editions with this club since 2016. You have been listening to Athlete of the Week on Radio Romania International. Our sports items can be accessed on rri.ro and on Facebook. Radio Romania International.
Hello and welcome to Truly Romanian, our regular folk music feature. I'm your host, Elena Inache. Today I bring you songs from the repertoire of the late vocalist Ioana Radu. Let's start with one of her best-known songs entitled Lelița Ioana.
Doamnă Leliță Ioană, te-aș mai duce până la doamnă Leliță Ioană, să mă duc din cramă, Leliță Ioană, să beau pință urma, cramă, Leliță Ioană. Și să mă duc în deal la Habie, Leliță Ioană, să beau vin de rasa Chie, Leliță Ioană, să mă năpește săracul, Leliță Ioană, să beau vin de sarigat, Leliță Ioană. Bună-i vinul mult îmi place, Leliță Ioană, bună-i vinul mult îmi place, Leliță Ioană, nu știu mie ce-i face, Leliță Ioană, nu știu mie ce-i face, Leliță Ioană. Și-oi călcau cu piciorul, Leliță Ioană, și-oi călcau cu piciorul, Leliță Ioană, și-oi bea vinul cu ulciorul, Leliță Ioană, și-oi bea vinul cu ulciorul, Leliță Ioană. Dar m-am jurat că nu-i mai bel, Leliță Ioană, m-am jurat că nu-i mai bel, Leliță Ioană, dar eu nu mă pot primet, Leliță Ioană, dar eu nu mă pot primet, Leliță Ioană, că m-am jurat că nu-i mai bel, Leliță Ioană, eu nu mă pot primet, Leliță Ioană.
We continue Truly Romanian with another song performed by Ioana Radu, a lyrical song this time entitled Youth Be Eternal.
Pe loc, hai, mai stai doar o clipă. Voi ani frumoși nu zburați pe-a vieții aripă. Flori minunate răsar în inimă poate, drumele Doamnei nu le-au cuprins. Stai, primăvară, pe loc unde zbori, primăvară. Mângâie inima mea cu adierea-ți fugară. Chiar dacă toamna vieții cu frunze de aramă spre ea mă cheamă, încet, încet. Și azi ochii mei tot mai cată banca veche de altă dată. Mi-ai spus te iubesc mai timide, știu de atunci cam mult, dar și ascultă șoapta ți-a stai tinerețe pe loc să popas lângă mine. Că vrei să pleci, nu te întorci niciodată, știu prea bine. Flori de zăpadă la tâmple de acum să cadă, alor mi doare și nu pot să prind. Stai primăvară pe loc unde zvoni primăvară, mângâie inima mea cu adierea fugară. Chiar dacă toamna vieții cu frunze de aramă spre ea mă cheamă, mai stai.
The next song that we invite you to listen to, specific of the southwestern region of Oltenia, is entitled Pay Us a Visit This Evening.
Mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă, mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă. Poarta e deschisă, lampa e aprinsă, mama s-a culcat, iar eu te-am așteptat. Lampa e aprinsă, poarta e deschisă, mama s-a culcat, iar eu te-am așteptat. Mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă, mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă. În pădurea rară, mitrasă încă mară, plânge se omoară că Ionel se soară. În pădurea rară, mitrasă încă mară, plânge se omoară că Ionel se soară. Mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă, mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă. În pădurea verde, mândram poartă șede, cu ochii privește la Ionel când trece. În pădurea verde, mândram poartă șede, cu ochii privește la Ionel când trece. Mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă, mai vino seara pe la noi, Ionele dragă. În pădurea beasă, năsasă și țeasă, plânge și oftează că Ionel o lasă. În pădurea beasă, năsasă și țeasă, plânge și oftează că Ionel o lasă.
Since we are in February, the month of love, I invite you to listen to a love song from Ioana Radu's repertoire.
Te rog să că te-am iubit, așa cum nimeni n-a iubit cândva. ce nu se pot uita. Te rog să uiți că te-am iubit, că viața mea și când ești mereu. Să ștergi din gând, din sufletul trudit, în care am fost doar tu și eu. Și într-un târziu, când printre vremi s-ar scutura flori de-ametit, romanța să-mi aduc. Acum când totul s-a sfârșit, te rog să uiți tot ce ți-am spus, dar nu uita că te-am iubit.
Living Romania. You are listening to Radio Romania International. Next in the program, People and Places.
Welcome to a fresh installment of People and Places with me, Mihaela Ignatescu. Today I will introduce you to the Romanian artist of Jewish descent, Isidore Risu. Later in the show we will take a quick trip to the spectacular Bule Lake in the heart of Făgăraș Mountains. Stay tuned. The European vanguard movement, started a century ago by the Romanian Tristan Tzara, continued in the post-war period, having at its forefront another Romanian of Jewish descent, poet, film critic and visual artist Isidore Risu. He is one of the most complex and most spectacular personalities of European vanguard, and not only. In 1945 he emigrated together with one of his friends, Serge Moscovich, who would become one of the biggest social psychologists in Europe. In fact, Isidore's real name was Goldstein and was born into a Jewish family from Botoșani in northeastern Romania. At a young age, when he was a little over 20, he went straight up on the firmament of post-war vanguard movement, especially, but not only, through Lettrism, the avant-garde movement he established in Paris in the mid-1940s, which was a universal language of art starting from the letter. Many of his discoveries played an important role in everything relating to the cultural vanguard movements of the 1950s, 1960s and 1970s. As a filmmaker, Isidore Risu participated even in the Cannes Film Festival in 1951 with an experimental film that triggered lots of controversies, but which is known as the Manifesto of the Lettrist Cinema. Lettrism was so innovative and fascinating that its fame crossed the ocean. Isidore Risu and painter Maurice Lemaitre, the poet's closest collaborator, appear in one of the documentaries made by Orson Welles in 1955 to capture Europe's cultural diversity. Although he admitted his fascination for and inspiration from Dadaism and Surrealism, Isidore Risu was very keen on stressing the originality of his ideas. What he wanted was to innovate inside the very vanguard tradition. He did not want to be seen as an epigone, but respected them. He wrote a lot about them. He wrote books about theatre and film aesthetics, and created new concepts in this field. He also wrote about painting. In cinematography, the new French wave, but also American filmmakers of the 60s and 70s, were influenced by Issa's thinking. He didn't leave aside math and physics either. Actually, what he tried to do was find a universal language that would unify all arts and sciences. Plagiarism is a kind of ground zero, a common denominator of human creative manifestations. The basis is the latter, which goes beyond any frontier and separation of any kind. So his endeavor was to unify all manifestations of the human spirit into one universal super-concept. Unfortunately, the Romanian culture has done little in terms of acknowledging Isidore Isou. Most of his books have never been translated into Romanian, and many of his concepts have remained unknown, including in the artistic circles. After his death in July 2007, many of his books were republished in France, and a big exhibition was organized, bringing together his paintings, engravings, book and magazine collections and letters. Well, now I think it would be a great time for some music, so I invite you to listen to the Romanian band Beregratis with one of their hits, Paredu.
Ieșoare, și-mi pare că lumea asta toată e a mea. Lumina, caldă lină, tu ai adus iubire în viața mea.
On Radio Romania International. One of Romania's amazing natural wonders, Bula Lake, is a spectacular must-see landmark. The glacier lake has been carved 2,034 meters up into the rugged stones of the Făgăraș Mountains, named the Transylvanian Alps by the French geographer Emmanuel de Marton. It's part of the Făgăraș Nature Reserve, stretching over an area of 180 hectares, and has a typical glacial relief with moraines, terraces, and a U-shaped valley dominated by deeply granulated ridges. The first climb in this massif was documented by Dr. G. Linde around 1700 in the Bulea-Valea Doamnei region. Before 1750, a new report mentions the presence in the area of Captain Jacob Zotner for geographical purposes and related to the drawing of the border. An important role in promoting tourism in this area was played by the Carpathian Society of Transylvania, founded in Sibiu in 1880. The organization built several access roads to the mountains, placed a significant number of markings, and organized numerous summer and winter ascents, many of them for the first time. In 1975, in order to facilitate the access to the chalets and to the ridge route, a cable car line was installed, which is the only access way in winter. Făgăraș Mountains are particularly beautiful, creating a breathtaking scenery both in summer and in winter. With peaks that exceed 2,000 meters, they are perfect if you like hiking. Several hiking routes start from Bulea Lake, going towards the mountain's peaks and dramatic valleys. Following the marked trails, you can reach their highest peak, Moldovanu, at 2,544 meters in approximately 9 hours, or the second highest, Negulio, at 2,535 meters in a 5-hour hike. In winter, Bulla Lake becomes a ski resort for expert skiers and snowboarders, with off-piste skiing and snowboarding on the longest slope in the Carpathians. The piste, which stretches over 14 kilometers, offers high adrenaline sensations, but it can be extremely dangerous. The two rustic chalets near the lake, Paltinu, built initially as the hunting lodge of the communist ruler Nicolae Ceausescu, and the Bulla Lake Chalet, offer great year-round accommodation that fits perfectly within the landscape. With double rooms and apartments, restaurants with traditional Romanian food, and even spaces for weddings, birthdays and conferences, the chalets have all that you might need for a holiday in the middle of nature at over 2,000 meters high, surrounded by superb views. Usually in winter, Bulla Lake is the place where one can have a unique experience at the first ice hotel opened in Eastern Europe, made with ice cubes extracted from the lake. The hotel, which has double rooms, igloos, nice restaurant and a bar, is marvelously sculpted and decorated, providing everything you need for an exceptional stay. Unfortunately, this winter temperatures have been unusually high, and the ice hotel could not be built. But even so, if you happen to travel to the area, don't miss Bulla Lake. It's one of the most beautiful places in Romania, and it's definitely worth visiting no matter the season. You have been listening to People and Places.
Coming up next on Radio Romania International, Simply Folk. Welcome everyone, I'm Vlad Palko. Today we will introduce you to Rodica Manciu, a very talented folk vocalist from Moldavia. She started singing at a very young age as she took part in many events of village life. She started taking part in folk contests and then made her first recordings with the public radio and TV stations. Listen to her performing this song in a 1984 recording.
broadcast in English for listeners in Western Europe and Japan has come to an end. You can listen to our next program for Western Europe tomorrow at 6:30 hours UTC on 7345 kHz in analog system and on 6040 kHz in the DRM system. Listeners in Japan can listen to our next program tomorrow at 23 hours UTC on 7325 kHz and 9620 kHz. We can also be heard on the internet at www.rri.ro channel 1. If you have any comments or suggestions, please write an email at engl@rri.ro. Goodbye.